Welcome back to the Teaching Tax Flow podcast, everybody. Episode 117 here into the new year of 2025. We're going to take some time and we're going to dive into what some goals are that you as an individual or a business owner can look at here in the new year. But before we do that, as always, let's take a brief moment and thank our episode sponsor.
This podcast is brought to you by Strategic Associates. Are you a high-income earner, real estate investor, or successful entrepreneur who is frustrated by having to pay $75,000 or more of annual tax liability? If so, Strategic Associates can help. Your first step to saving thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, is to contact Roger Roundy at roger@strategicag.net or by calling 801-641-2956 and be sure to tell him TTF sent you.
Alrighty, let's dive into this one here. We're going to look at, as we mentioned in the preview or the intro, some goals here getting into the new year. So everybody always starts off the new year. Oh, I'm going to join a gym. I'm going to, do the dishes more. I'm going to walk the dog more. I'm going to go to the playground more. Any of those things. But we're going to look at some of those as it relates to the financial goals. So Chris, I'm actually really glad before we jump into this that we did pivot off of a different topic into this one, because this is super relevant, right? We're coming up on, what do they call, like Quitters Day is like the second Friday of the new year. So let's quit the quitting, I guess. And I don't know. I can't come up with any cheesy dad jokes, but
that's all right, John.
Say?
Well, first of all, Happy New Year to everyone in the Teaching Tax Flow community. We truly appreciate you. We had a lot of listeners in the last year. We've had amazing guests. We went on to YouTube, so now you can either listen to the audio version or watch. This is going to get salesy for a minute, but we really, really need one thing from you: to rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. 5 stars. Why? Because that allows us, that puts the fuel in us to be able to continue to provide complimentary content. It allows us to expand our footprint, to have more people in the Teaching Tax Flow community. The more people in the Teaching Tax Flow community we have, the better resources we have to talk about these issues because the best topics are derived from our Teaching Tax Flow community, be that defeating taxes on our private LinkedIn group. That's defeatingtaxes.com if you're feeling left out. And so that's my ask, and I'm excited about the new year. I always do some goal setting on my own. But before we get started, John, what were you doing when the ball dropped?
Oh, I hate to admit it. I was sick as a dog. So I think I was in bed by like 10 o'clock. But you know what? You said it was going to get salesy there. You would be a terrible used car salesman because you actually meant that from the heart. It sounded like you're trying to sell snake oil. So oops. I got a little teared up there for a minute, buddy. Look at I'm wiping my tears when he was watching.
Well, we have for the last 3 years, our family we visit Michigan for Christmas, and we visit Texas, visiting my wife's family and my family, and both our families, I guess you would say, for Thanksgiving. So we've made a tradition with our family, just us 5, my wife and my 3 kids, to do something. And the last few years we've gone to Orlando, didn't step foot at Disney. We went to Disney Springs, that's it. We had an amazing time, and we got to go to this annual New Year's party at it's called the Marriott World Center Hotel. Hey, you should be a sponsor, Marriott. And we got to see the ball drop, fireworks show. There's an awesome heated swimming pool, and it was just a blast. So great way to ring in the new year. And as a new year came in, I started thinking about my personal goals, thinking about the goals that I obtained in 2024, the ones I did not yet obtain. But I'm satisfied, and I'm going to live in the gain, as we like to say, on the goals obtained. And then thinking about personally, I've got faith goals, fitness goals, personal goals, and business goals. But since this is a podcast about finance and tax, we're going to stick with business or personal and personal financial and business goals. So I'm hoping that you've started the goal process. But if you haven't, because if you don't have a goal, you can't measure something. This could be that spark for you to figure out what your goals are for the next year. And we're going to focus on how to do that and what you should consider from a setting financial goals, not just what that process is, but also who you should include. And then we're going to talk a little bit about goals if you have a business. So, John, have you done any goal setting here for? I know you want to get your pickleball duper score up.
Oh, of course. And you know what's funny too, Chris? I mean, this is whether it's financial or house stuff or anything in life. I actually have found myself probably in about the past maybe 4 or 5 years not doing them in the new year, because I think I'm more inclined to get busy with other stuff and then kind of fall into I'm going to tweak them or put them off. So I always tend to do them around, like, I don't know, October-ish, something. So then I feel, because I'm a little competitive in some sense, that way I feel like I have a leg up on everybody else.
You're kind of going in. Well, I mean, this is just a good way to get start fresh. And we've got goals for teaching tax flow in this podcast. So we're going to continue to strive forward. And so let's talk about what someone should do in setting some financial goals for 2025, personal financial goals. And then we'll jump into business. So if you have already started setting goals, great. Congratulations. I still think this could be very valuable to you. But the first thing you're going to want to do is kind of figure out what season of your life are you in? What's your priority? Like for me, I'm in the thick of things. I've got my child turning 16 this week. I've got a 14-year-old and an 11-year-old. So we're heavy into, planning financially for school. And they have activities. So a lot of our travel is around those activities. So that season of life that my wife and I are in, which we're truly enjoying, many of our resources are going towards those memories and those activities. And it's kind of sad, John, because my oldest son's a sophomore in high school, and I was like, man, how many Christmas breaks or holiday breaks or what have you do we have left here? Who knows where life's going to take us. So you already thinking about 25. My wife and I were looking at next year, New Year's. What trip are we going to do a year? Next year after Christmas and before through New Year's, and budgeting for that. So identifying your priorities, like, are you saving for a house? Are you trying to consolidate that? Is it education? Are you looking at retirement? Figuring out, or are you just getting started in your career? Are you determining how much money you should be putting aside towards retirement? Or are you worried about retirement? Are you looking at buying rental properties? So figuring out what your life goals are first, and then making sure your financial goals align with those, right? Because if you're someone, John, I mean, I'm saving for retirement, and however, I love what I'm doing. I don't know that I'm ever going to fully retire, unless for some reason I just mentally can't or physically can't do what I'm doing. So the retirement's important to me, but I'm not one of the, like our parents, John, and many people that maybe worked maybe in the big 3 or big corporations, they have that boom, I got my 30 years in and I'm having my retirement party, and then I'm not checking an email again. I'm not wired like that. So for me to focus on retirement as my number one financial goal doesn't align with my personal goal.
Right. It's one of those things too. I always reference kind of wild abstract articles that I've read. How Facebook became known as the high school reunion killer. Now people are saying that I don't know what it was. It wasn't the economy, but something became the retirement party killer, because there's far and few retirement parties, they said, over the past 5 years, because nobody's really retiring. They're just doing something else. Can you imagine that going to a retirement party and the next week you're like, this clown went out and got another job.
Right.
I feel like he just duped me into coming to a party for nothing. I don't even like the guy. So
I know. And I feel like a lot of times retirement, a lot of people that are retired are very active too, so where they're doing some type of work that's very meaningful to them. It could be just getting out of the house. Maybe, I love the holidays. So I could see doing that, or they like traveling, or they like to volunteer, So yeah, I would say figure out your life goals and then align your financial goals to that. The next step is going to be doing some type of budget. Now, this is a tough one. It's basically the equivalent of stepping on a scale, right? We don't like to do it, but we have to look at tracking our income and expenses, and that's something my wife and I have done. I mean, I become I succumb to this. Oh gosh, I've got a couple subscriptions that I signed up for. And I'm pretty good at if I unsigning up for like a week later or a month later. But sometimes I just cancel the subscription that I had that I really wasn't using anymore. And I figured there's something else I could do. So figuring out what your income is and making sure your expenses line up with that. Now we have so much technology. A lot of us, if you do online banking or if you use one specific credit card for all of your activities, you can kick out a report showing you what you want, what your spending is. But a lot of times, there's a general rule of thumb. About 50% of your income should go to your needs, 30% to your wants, and about 20% to savings and debt repayment. Again, that's just a rule of thumb. Your seasonal life will dictate what that means for you. But creating a budget, trust me, it's tough. I'm a CPA. I've been a CPA for 20 years. I hate looking at how much money we spent last year on what we spent it on. So, but you've got to create a budget. I mean, that's the framework for creating these goals.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And a lot of it too, it's, once you create a budget for something, whether it's, your life or a specific project, right? I've always found it where you might look at it and say, oh, wow, I'm not spending as much as I thought I was in one area, which is surprising. And it gives you a little bit more comfort in some sense, or it scares you to death. And you're like, holy cow, I need to cancel, XYZ, my Peloton membership. And I forgot I even had the darn thing. And, you'd be surprised. And that could be anything. You might look at it and say, wow, between 3 or 4 people in the household, we're all leasing vehicles and we're spending $2,700 a month. Like, this is crazy. Why don't we,
right?
Do something else? It surprises you.
Like groceries are expensive, but eating out, like one thing I think about trying to cut out is, when you go out to eat, it's not as fun, but if you don't order either an alcoholic drink or a soft drink, you save a lot of money. Just drinking water is not very fun. However, it does definitely, our kids are now out of that age where they get a free pop with their kid meal. I mean, we're out of the kiddie meal stage, except my little youngest at some restaurants. So, but yeah, create a budget. And then once you create that budget, if you're, whatever you allocate towards that savings or debt repayment, that's where you look at, okay, well, if I want to contribute to retirement, where am I at marginal tax rate wise? I'm going to go back to teaching tax flow, red, green, purple, gold. Are you in a higher marginal tax bracket? Higher marginal tax bracket means you're a red diagnosis. Okay, you might want to go with pre-tax with your retirement accounts. Are you in a lower marginal tax bracket right now? That's green. Should you consider doing Roth accounts? And then within those accounts, are you rebalancing? Is your risk appropriate with where you're at? I can't tell you how many people I've run into that, they started a job 10 years ago. They contributed to their 401k. At that point, they were 30 years old and they had a high amount of risk tolerance. And let's just say they're 50 now. Let's say it's 20 years. And they have a lower risk tolerance, but they never adjusted that with their contribution. So make sure you're balancing your risk and return. And that's where I would say that work with a licensed financial advisor. Now, if you need a referral to one, please reach out. Let us know. We work with a ton of financial advisors. We're going to make sure that you find someone with a great fit. But so you're doing the job of you're contributing to that retirement account. Why don't you have someone help you out with managing that account? And figure out how much, what percent of your income are you willing to put into that retirement account based on your marginal tax rate. And that plays a role, John. We had a real interesting content. We did a podcast, I think, on should you pay your house off if you had the cash, and debt management's another thing. So ultimately, if you have high interest debt, I would seriously consider paying that off. It's kind of like just carrying extra weight. But if your only debt's a 3% mortgage, maybe you want to allocate more towards your retirement.
Right. I've seen a video too a while back. Here I come with one of my crazy examples where somebody broke down, they looked at it and said, everybody has an ambition or, a goal to be an investor in something in hopes of making I'm just pulling a number out of thin air, in hopes of making a 10% return every year, but they carry, say $100,000 in credit card debt at like 24% interest. and they're comfortable with that, but yet they're trying to make 10% somewhere else. They said, if you looked at everything you have, you'd realize that if you just paid off your debt, you're making 20 something percent guaranteed return. So it's, and that comes down to what you had mentioned too, right? Laying everything out, creating kind of a budget. You can do it in a spreadsheet, a napkin. There's all kinds of tools out there. I know Rocket, I think, has a great one out there, just an app that looks at all your subscriptions and your spending and exports, and there's all kinds of stuff.
Absolutely. That's huge. And then also I would try to get, this is really hard. I'd try to get some type of emergency fund built up. 3 months of living expenses at a minimum, 6 months at a max. So if your monthly living expenses are $5,000 a month, try to get that $15,000 saved up, put to the side in your savings account. And then beyond, and then if you get to 30,000, great. Over 30,000, now let's look at either looking at some different investments, in that sort of stuff. And when you're younger too, I mean, really take a look right now at your, do you have the appropriate life insurance? Especially if you start a family, those are the things that you have to think about. And again, if you have questions, jump into the Teaching Tax Flow community. We are happy to help. But build up that emergency fund. Sometimes people have too much in their emergency fund, in my opinion. And it's, especially with interest rates, not the best. That might be something where you say, okay, well, hey, I've got my emergency fund set up. Now I'm going to start saving towards investing in a rental property or doing something else. So build up that emergency fund and plan for taxes. Remember, if you don't plan for taxes, the IRS picks your tax. If you do plan, then you pick your tax. So think about, okay, are my tax withholdings appropriate? Am I being tax efficient? Can I contribute to a health savings account? Does my life goal say, hey, I want to help my children. I want my children to go to college. If that's your goal, you might want to put more in your 529 plan than your retirement, and a little less in the retirement plan. There's no one size fits all. But if you don't have some goals that you set, right, then you're really running around like a chicken with your head cut off. Imagine a hockey team, or let's talk about more popular sports, a football team. Just kidding, John. We know how much you love hockey. Or a soccer team running, especially football. What would happen if football went out there and people were just running around and they didn't have a play? That's what's happening if you don't have a plan. You're going through the motions, but you don't have a plan. So come up with that plan, figure out what your marginal tax rate is, and that helps with the tax planning and strategy. Now, sometimes you can get analysis by paralysis. And I mean, looking at your bank account and budget every day might drive you crazy, right? You want to enjoy the ride. If you want to stop and get a premium coffee somewhere instead of make it at home, great. I found myself getting into a rut with my oldest that we would stop at a coffee shop, a variety of different coffee shops here in Franklin after school. And I'm like, even he's like, man, we're wasting a lot of money. So Wednesday's our day to go get get a coffee. The other days we make our coffee at home. And I can live with that, and he could live with that. So regularly review and adjust your goals and your budget, but don't if someone's trying to lose weight, for instance, usually you don't want to weigh yourself every day, right? You want to do it once a week or once a month. So review and adjust, make your goals realistic, and use personal advice. Like I said, a financial advisor or a tax professional could really, really help you do this. So if you're married, you guys, it's an exercise you want to do with your spouse. If you're unmarried, that's okay. Great. It might make it a little easier, right? Create that budget. So define life goals, make sure financial goals align. Step 2, step 3, create a budget that makes sense for you. Step 4 is figure out how you're going to implement the things in your budget. And then step 5 to me is you surround yourself. We talked about the board of directors, right? With the people that can help you make this happen. So if you're putting away, 22% of your income into savings, great. At some point, that savings account is going to be more than 6 months of your living expenses. Let's sit down and let's create a plan and work with a financial advisor in that case.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of this too carries over, even if you're a sole proprietor, if you're a freelancer, really if you own a business of any size, right? A lot of this, like we're talking about budgeting and setting things aside and working with a professional and kind of all these avenues for it. It's almost the exact same thing for the business. Sometimes it's one and the same, sometimes they're very different, right?
Absolutely. Great segue to business. So what for those of that are self-employed, or even if you're doing the side hustle, business could be a lot of times unpredictable, right? Especially in what type of business you're in, and could be seasonal. But without a plan, your business is going to run you. You're not going to run it. So for business, we've got to be a little more intentional, right? We've got to be a little more because we've got to probably be a little more disciplined. And I can't tell you how many, working with business owners for over 20 years, most of them very closely held businesses. Some of them are small, some of them are bigger. But the ones that know their numbers do much, much better than the ones that they don't know their numbers, right? Because we've got very successful people that I can't tell you how many times I've heard like, hey, I made, a couple, and this might be you. You might be listening this. You might be on a walk, a treadmill. You might be relaxing, driving. You're not alone. If you're sitting there saying, man, I made $200,000 last year, but I don't know where it all went. I made $50,000. Fill in the blank of the top. I made X amount of dollars. And if you're thinking to yourself, I don't know where it all went, that's when it's time to say, okay, let's sit down and let's figure out some goal setting for 2025. So for businesses, very similar. Figure out where you're at in your stage of your business. Did you just get started? Are you in the growth mode? Are you in a transitional mode? Are you looking for a successor? And define specific financial targets. So every industry is a little different. So for our industry, we have a target for new client, revenue in different divisions. But it doesn't always, it could be client satisfaction, client retention. But use the acronym SMART, okay? SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound. SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound. If you use the SMART goal setting, then it makes life a lot easier. Try to be as specific as possible. And again, not all of your business goals for 25 have to be financial. They could be something like, hey, we want to, like for teaching tax law, right? We want to have X amount of downloads in 2025. We don't get necessarily compensated per download, but that tells us our reach is growing and that we're making an impact, the impact we want on our taxpayers, right? And then look at your past performance. Make sure that your goals are achievable. It's great to have goals, but make an unachievable goal saying, "This is my first year in business. I want to make $5 million in net profit." You might be setting yourself up for failure. So make sure it's measurable, but also achievable. But challenge yourself. So look at your prior year financials, and John, we could be quite a little bit of an open book to everyone. We do it ourselves here at Teaching Tax Law, right? We do a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So what went well? What could we improve on? And what are the drivers to make our goals obtainable? And then come up with a plan, like every quarter look at things. There's certain things that we look at weekly in our business. There's certain things we look at monthly, quarterly, and annually. And then make sure that your cash flow is analyzed too, right? Because let's say you have a sales goal. We have a seasonal business, and Christmas is your biggest month of the 50% of your revenue comes in Christmas. That's different. That's different than someone that maybe is in a professional service that has a subscription model. And then tax planning, right? There are tons of tax deductions and credits, industry-specific things that you need to be aware of, changes in legislation. Hopefully you're subscribing to this podcast because we put a lot of content out there, or the Teaching Tax to the YouTube channel. But make sure that you're working with, again, as a business owner, your board of directors, a tax professional that could be there for you, not only to do the tax compliance work or the tax preparation work, but also be there to answer questions and help you moving forward.
Absolutely. And there's so much overlap, right? Like we're talking between businesses and individuals, where a lot of it, if you almost start, what I look at this, right, is start on the individual side and then kind of follow that a little bit through as much of the business side as you can. And it'll make your life a lot easier, I think, than maybe going the other way around, right?
Absolutely. Because just like business, build up that 3 to 6 months of operating expenses, just like personal, and then your business can start investing in different things. Or one of the questions we get a lot as CPAs is that, hey, should I take money out of this business? Well, first of all, depending on how you're structured, the answer would be different, right? Situationally dependent. But once you build that 3 months of operating expenses, I'd say if you have a significant amount if you're a sole proprietor, 3 months is great. If you have employees or overhead, getting up to 6 months is probably better. And then you might have a goal of, hey, I really want to buy an office building for myself. I want to build, instead of renting, I want to buy something. Then that's the goal, right? So start working towards that goal. So you're right, John. It's very similar to personal. The goal setting for businesses, using SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound, making sure that you have a plan. I think you got to be a little more strategic, and I think the cash flow management's is more challenging, right? Because if you're someone that's on a salary or you have predictable amount of hours, let's say you get paid hourly, but let's say you work at a warehouse or a factory, and you guys have work throughout the year. Maybe there's a layoff in July, but your income's more predictable as an employee maybe than someone that's self-employed.
Right. Well, I definitely look forward to knocking out some more episodes as we're talking through this. I was, speaking of planning, I was looking at our schedule here for some upcoming shows. So we won't give away any tips or I should say hints, but just subscribe and you'll figure out what we're talking about. And I think one of the
absolutely, and
one of the biggest takeaways from this, right, is what's that?
No, I'm sorry. Sorry, I interrupted you, but I'm going to challenge you. If you've listened to this, find an accountability partner. Write down. I look at my goals every day on my whiteboard. So if you're not comfortable sharing their goals with someone, write them down so you can look at them, or go on, share them with our team, share them with the Teaching Tax Law community. Go on to Defeating Taxes, post anonymously. Just say, hey, these are my goals. What do you guys think? It's a group effort. You can't get all your goals on your own.
And that's a great way to do it too. Yeah. Post anonymously in there. And I mean, you might have a great conversation with somebody and then you could, offline it and take it from there. But, yeah, tons of resources on there. Obviously finding an accountability partner is probably the best thing you can do. And really somebody that's not kind of tied into your life on a daily basis anyway. So they really have no skin in the game except helping you succeed, right? They're not going to try to skew you in one direction because they want a new car or something specific. So should work out pretty well. And yeah, we look forward to more and more of these shows here. Again, we got our topics planned out and it's going to be great. So until next time, we'll see you back here again. I can't say next year because it is next year already. So next week, roughly the same time, completely different topic here on the Teaching Tax Flow podcast.
The content provided is for educational purposes only. We encourage you to seek personalized investment advice from your financial professional. For all tax and legal advice, please consult your CPA or attorney. Investment advisory services are offered through Cabin Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Securities are offered through Cabin Securities, a registered broker-dealer. The content of this podcast does not constitute an offer of securities. Offerings can only be made through an offering memorandum, and you should carefully examine the risk factors and other information contained in the memorandum.